This is the Disgusting Food Museum in Malmö, Sweden, where your ticket in the door is a barf bag. This is true, and I did make sure to carry that barf bag the entire time I was there. I did not use it, but I was worried. The building holds over 80 of the most disgusting foods from all around the world, and you can definitely smell it. I'm talking about the most putrid fermented fish to the stinkiest cheeses you could ever think of. And even with a short visit, because honestly, the smell was absolutely suffocating, my ideas of what is and isn't edible was definitely challenged, and I want to share the highlights here. Which do you think is more disgusting? Would you rather drink milk from an anonymous cow or drink fresh milk from your friend who is lactating? Here's another one, let me give you one more. Would you rather get your protein from a pig that's been slaughtered on a factory farm where most of its life it barely had room to move? Or get protein from insects that you caught yourself, like grasshoppers, mealworms, and crickets? What I'm trying to get at is that disgust is individual and cultural. Well, it's one of the 6 fundamental human emotions that we see across the world in all cultures. What elicits disgust varies culture to culture. This means that you learn disgust from your surroundings, from the people that are around you as you're growing up. And that's if we take the traditional definition of disgust, which scientists typically define as having an extreme revulsion for something. In this case, we're going to talk about food. And what was really fun for me is the museum had plenty of American foods that everyone else finds disgusting. And I want to talk about those, but I think that will be a separate video. So here are some of my other favorites that I saw in the museum. Like any good meal, let's get warmed up with some soup. And first one, this is bird's nest soup, where the main ingredient is actually solidified saliva from the swiftlet bird. Now, I have never heard of the swiftlet bird, but apparently this type of bird, instead of collecting like sticks and twigs to make a nest, it actually uses its own gummy saliva. I guess when its saliva is exposed to air, it hardens and they basically make this whole hardened saliva nest. Now, what people discovered was you could actually go around and collect these nests to make a soup out of it. Key steps in preparing this soup are taking the nests and soaking them in cold water overnight, and then stewing this with chicken broth. It turns into this gelatinous mixture very similar to egg drop soup if you've ever had that, but there are tiny little pieces of the nest that you can chew on. This soup is actually such a delicacy that its nickname is the caviar of the East, and a single bowl of bird's nest soup is gonna cost you anywhere from $30 to $100, which is a lot for soup. Another soup I was introduced to is kale peche, and I think the museum just simply called this sheep eyeball soup, which gives you more of an idea of what this soup is all about. This is a traditional Kurdish dish that when translated into English, it actually means from head to hooves. And this makes sense because the main ingredients are a sheep's skull, which would include the eyes, the tongue, the brain, and also the sheep's hooves. And this is all boiled together for about 8 hours with some spices like cinnamon and bay leaves and some herbs. And then after that very long boil, I guess the meat, everything becomes very tender. And in places where the soup is quite common, I guess it's a very calorie-heavy breakfast so that workers will have energy throughout the entire day. Although for me, just seeing a picture of it was a little bit much. Now let's move on to a category which I named foods that are trying to kill you. And I don't know why we do this as humans, but we love to eat things that if they're prepared slightly the wrong way, it would be fatal. My first example is fugu, and you might know this as a Japanese dish that features a poisonous pufferfish because this fish contains a toxin called tetrodotoxin. And try to say that 3 times in a row. Tetrodotoxin, tetrodotoxin, tetrodotoxin. Wasn't bad. To make sure you don't contaminate the meat, this dish has to be prepared extremely carefully. You have to make sure to remove the toxic parts like the liver, the ovaries, the eyes, and the skin, because you don't want that toxin getting near the meat at all. If a mistake is made, it's actually very horrifying because if you ingest the poison, it starts to paralyze your muscles while you are still conscious, but you can't move until eventually it prevents you from breathing and you die of asphyxiation. Because of this, the preparation of fugu is often controlled by the law in countries where it's popular, like Japan and Korea. And typically this means that chefs who are certified went through 3 or more years of training to prepare this dish. Now we're going to head over to Finland so I can introduce you to a dish called stenmurkla, but it's also known as Finnish fugu and the false morel. This is a specific mushroom that really closely looks like the edible morel, except if you eat this mushroom raw, you die. Scientifically, this mushroom is named Gyromitra esculenta, and the Finns love to eat these bad boys. You can find these poisonous mushrooms available in Finnish grocery stores, where they of course have warnings and specific directions on how to make the mushrooms safe to eat. I guess this is a pretty simple process of boiling the mushrooms multiple times while renewing the boiling water using fresh water every boil. But of course, if you don't know you have to do that, the mushrooms are fatal. And for that reason, most countries that aren't Finland, it is actually illegal to sell these mushrooms. To go with our foods, how about we check out some beverages, and I have some very interesting ones for you. The first is kopi luwak, or civet coffee, which originated from Indonesia. This is an extremely special type of coffee where the coffee cherries are eaten by the civet, sort of the small mammal found in Asia. I'm not very familiar with a civet, but anyways, they eat the coffee cherries and partially digest them, and then people collect the feces. These are then made into coffee beans and sold at an extremely high price. But if you're craving a cold drink, I have just the right thing for you. I want to introduce you to kumis, which is essentially fermented horse milk. It's a traditional drink in Russia and much of Central Asia. This is made by taking raw horse milk and fermenting it for hours, sometimes even days, while churning or agitating it, much like making butter. Because horse's milk actually has more sugars than say cow's or goat's milk, what happens when it's fermented is that lactic acid bacteria start to acidify the milk, but also the yeast present will start producing ethanol or alcohol and also carbon dioxide. So in the end, this kumis is fermented, but it's slightly alcoholic and also is sparkling due to that carbon dioxide. Next we have sauerkraut juice, because I don't know how to speak Polish and I can't even take a guess at how to say this name. This is a health drink out of Poland made by directly pressing sauerkraut. So literally, as the name says, sauerkraut juice. Now this one isn't too surprising to me because at least in the US, pickle juice is becoming a thing. For health benefits, people are taking a shot of pickle juice. I'm sure they have some marketing like it's full of vitamins or minerals. So maybe the next big thing is sauerkraut juice. The last beverage I want to talk about was the one that honestly disturbed me the most. So just a heads up, especially if you're an animal lover. So this is mouse wine, which is a traditional drink from China and Korea. The preparation of mouse wine is not for the faint of heart. So here is how it's prepared. About a dozen or so baby mice are taken soon after they are born. They must be younger than 72 hours or less. Their eyes must still be closed. These are the rules. I don't know why these are the rules. I'm just telling you. The baby mice are then dropped into a bottle of rice wine, and then that is allowed to ferment for about a year or so. Like I said, this is a very traditional drink, and it's supposed to have a lot of health benefits, and specifically I saw that if you have liver disease or if you have asthma, it is supposed to help with some of these health problems. Like any good meal, I think we should end on some desserts, and luckily the museum had no shortage of desserts. First up, we have the wasabi Kit Kat. Would you like to challenge your taste buds with a wasabi flavored chocolate bar? This unique combination of white chocolate and wasabi was only available in Japan, and you probably know wasabi as that green paste that is sinus clearing and you eat with sushi. I'm a real baby. I'm super lame. I have only tried wasabi once. I do not eat wasabi. I would not choose this candy bar. I think combos like this are very cultural. Like, as an American, I love to eat peanut butter and jelly. Ever since I was a kid, when I lived in the Netherlands, no one ate peanut butter and jelly. That's not a combination there. So maybe this white chocolate plus wasabi was a great combination for Japan. Other places, I would not be interested. Now let's travel over to Australia with musk sticks. These candies are really a soft fondant sticks, like kind of chewy. They're usually super bright colored and the flavor is musk. What I read on the internet is that it tastes like a over-perfumed toilet cake, a deodorant stick, or a bunch of old ladies waiting at a bus stop. If you don't know what exactly musk is, this is like a secreted substance that male deers typically use to mark their territory, to leave their scent. Is it the best flavor for a candy? Not what I would pick, but apparently Australians love it. And the last dessert, this is the one I found most interesting because it was like a protein-packed dessert, you know, gotta build that muscle. And this is tavukka uzu, which is a Turkish dessert. Tavukka uzu, when translated into English, literally means chicken breast, so you can probably see where this dessert is going. It's really kind of like a Turkish milk pudding, but it does have this shredded chicken breast in it. Now, the chicken is actually not that noticeable from what I was reading because it's boiled for many, many hours until it separates into these very fine, very thin fibers, and then that is actually pounded down. Only after that is the chicken then added to fresh milk and sugar. The final dessert is this very like smooth, thick pudding. It's almost like chewable in your mouth and is very, very similar to rice pudding if you've ever had that. If you enjoyed this video, next I would watch my video on food scandals from all around the world, which explains why exactly we need food regulation.